Hey, hey, hey. Good morning, good afternoon. Good morning, good afternoon, wherever you are in the world. I'm so happy to be here. Oh my goodness. It's one of my favorite things to interact with practitioners. I know I say that every week, but it never gets old. It's really like the highlight of my week. I love it. I love it. I love it. I love it. I want to pour into you today on some important topics. Well, one really important topic, two of them that kind of blur together, but it's really one topic. And that is that we get to thrive. We get to thrive while we're doing really good work in the world. And sometimes we think it's either one or the other. So I want to pour into you today about that. And before I dive into all of that juicy content for today, I want to officially, personally, my voice to yours, invite you to the virtual retreat that's 2 weeks from today. So it's functional anatomy virtual retreat. We're going to meet for 3 hours. And the reason is because, well, first, I love it. And I want to pour into you. And also on Tuesdays, we meet for an hour. I do like 20 to 30 minutes of teaching. And I thought, hey, you know what? More is better, because after every Tuesday, with the 20 to 30 minutes of teaching, I get flooded with emails, which I love. I love hearing from you guys and what you're up to. So why not more is better? More is better, right? So let's meet for 3 hours, 2 weeks from today. And, mini retreat, 3 hours of training. So I'm going to talk about functional anatomy and piecing together treatment plans and what the order of things gets to be in order for us to put together really good treatment plans, how to know what function we should be looking for when we're working on functional anatomy, all that type of good stuff. So that's going to be it's going to be 3 hours, right? That's going to take up our time. We're going to meet 2 weeks from today. So if you have not yet registered for that event, please feel free to grab your seat and invite your friends, grab seats with them. There will not be replays. I've had a couple questions about that. There will not be replays because we're going to be meeting live, but we will give you access to the material afterward. I'll share all those details when we meet. Okay. So 2 weeks from today, please come. And if you can't come for the whole thing, that's okay. You're welcome to come in and come out. And it will be interactive. So there'll be time to ask questions and have your questions specifically answered and that type of stuff. So that's what's happening 2 weeks from today, which is why we're not going to meet next week for our live training. We're going to be preparing for that retreat. So today is our last live before the retreat, and I'm super excited to meet with you today. Like I said, I want to talk to you today about something that might not seem specifically anatomy related, but the truth is that it is, in my mind, related. And the reason is because, like you, like me, I've been at this game for a while and I love it. And I love taking continuing education. Sometimes it's mandated, of course, in order to keep our licenses and certificates valid. But the truth is that we love taking continuing education, or you wouldn't be here with me. You wouldn't be watching the replays and asking for more replays. Because we're all here. We're all interested in doing good work. And whether it's mandated or not, we know that we get to continue to up-level our game. And what I also recognize is that just because we have more tools, more continuing education, more techniques, some of them work for more clients than others. Some are specialty techniques that we get to pull out when needed. And in all of those techniques and tools, they don't necessarily mean that we're going to make a better living. They mean that we're going to do better work, but they don't necessarily mean that we're going to make a better living. And that's concerning, right? And the reason it's concerning to me is because we're here to do amazing work. We're really important. We're really important, and people need us. And I know you know that. You've had that feedback from your clients. I've had it from mine. And I really believe in us as an industry. And what I also know about the industry is that the average lifespan of a massage therapist career is 4 to 6 years. It's not very long. There's a couple of things that play into that. One is that it's physically demanding. Another is that it's an hours for dollars game, which I'm going to talk about here in a minute. And it might feel like we're continually reinventing the wheel. And another is from burnout, right? Like we just get burned out from it being hours for dollars and physically demanding. But there's another key piece that I think is in there, and that is that most of us as practitioners don't have the training to know how to make a really good living doing what we do. So right now I'm talking about like skill aside. So assuming that we're registered and certified and licensed and amazing at what we do, pouring into our continuing education, and we come to the game ready and able. That still doesn't necessarily mean that we can convert that into a thriving business, meaning remunerated generously. And as I mentioned in my email to you all this morning, sometimes thinking about being paid generously brings up like icky feelings for us. And that's what gets in our way. So there's lots of reasons why I believe that an average lifespan of a massage therapist career is 4 to 6 years. And I'm going to talk to you about that here today. That's what I'm here to do. Interestingly enough, as a movement practitioner, most yoga teachers never become full-time as yoga teachers. Now, they might work full-time, but it's not their full-time sustainable income. They're not generating enough income to make it a full-time revenue-producing endeavor. And that's also a problem, right? Like if that's what we're doing full-time, but we're not making enough money to live off of, that's not workable. And so what happens then is that we end up getting into this scarcity mindset, and we're like running and chasing the dollar and worrying about our livelihood, which actually depletes us from being able to deliver that high skill that we've trained to bring to the table. So that gets to stop. It's like a running hamster wheel that doesn't work for us. And it actually depletes us as practitioners, and it also waters down our industry. What we need is more of us to be thriving, because there are more people in the world who need us than there are those of us to serve. So we need to be thriving so that we can pour into the people who need us, and we need to be thriving in order to do that. So it gets to be, we continue to give from a perpetually full cup. Okay, so as I already mentioned, regardless of our training, whether we're movement or manual practitioners, and I'm speaking to all, right? I'm both movement and manual practitioner. I've done either or at times, I've done both at times, depends on what's called for. And it requires that we have amazing skill to be able to produce the results that our clients want, for sure. And with that amazing skill, we're not trained in those skill sets to necessarily make more money. What it means is that we come to the table with more value to add, but not necessarily knowing how to make that a win-win. And then we get all like icked out about it. When we're working though, hours for dollars, whether we're manual practitioners and we schedule on the hour, or we're movement practitioners and we train hourly classes, whether it's 60-minute hours or 75-minute hours or 90-minute hours, the point is that we're trading our time and we're trading our dollars for that time, which means we must be thoughtful about how we're generating revenue. We must be thoughtful about what we bring to the table and how to charge fairly so that we feel like we're generating value and we're giving value, right? And otherwise it becomes a rinse and repeat, because as we're generating dollars for hours, we can unfortunately get into a Groundhog Day rinse and repeat. Where am I going to get my next client for my next hour to fill? And then we're spending our energy on generating the next new client, or getting the next class or the next class time spot that we think is going to generate more revenue. And yes, that's important. And what we're doing in that hour and how we're generating revenue in that hour is just as important. Otherwise, we're perpetually chasing, like the stick in front of us with the cheese hanging in front of it. And that just doesn't work. That's an exhausting way to work before we even get to the work that we do, which is physically demanding, right? So it gets to be really thoughtful. We need to be really thoughtful about this. And we don't want to keep reinventing the wheel at every pass. So all that to say, I saw this early on in my career. And when someone mentioned to me early on, well, that's an hours for dollars game, I didn't actually know what that meant. And then fast forward, I fell in love with what I do and wanted to keep doing it. And then I heard that phrase again, that's an hours for dollars game, as if it was a negative thing. And what I thought was, well, I'm not going to be taught to to fall out of love with what I do. That's like not going to happen. So what do I do with this hours for dollars setup so that I can, as I suggested for all of you, come to the game full and also make a good living? What I didn't want to do was be in love with what I do predominantly, but then have 2 side gigs to make up the difference, because that's dividing my attention. If I'm full-time as a practitioner Monday through Thursday, but then I'm working as, in the service industry, bartending or waitressing or at a grocery store on the weekends or in the evening so that I can, quote, make ends meet, then my attention is divided between what I do in my zone of genius and what I'm doing to make up the difference in revenue. It just doesn't work. So what I would love to appeal to all of you is to recognize that it is very possible. And in fact, I'm proof of it. It is very possible to work full-time in the industry that you love, to be focused solely in the industry that you love, and also make a really good living doing it. And that requires more training. Just like whatever your craft is, whether it's movement or manual or a combination of practices, whatever your skill is as a practitioner, you needed training to become excellent at it. I know you did. I did too. We need training to become excellent at the business side of things too. And that's not included in a yoga sequencing class or in a manual technique workshop. It just isn't. And I know that because I've been in the continuing education game for decades. So like you, I've been searching for the answers for all things in my industry so that I can be really great at it. And what I found is that there's a gap, and that's great because then I get to fill it. So what I do in my Mastery Practitioner Training Program, which is a year-long program that you guys have all heard me talk about, what I do is make it really apparent at the very beginning of that year-long track that at the end of the year, if my practitioners have not generated more revenue, more value for both them and their clients by the end of the year-long track, I actually think I failed them. Because it's not of any value to give a year's worth of intensive training to make you more skilled so that you leave that training and not even be able to pay back your tuition, let alone increase your revenue. So how do you do that in a way that's fair, right? I hear that all the time. Well, I don't want to, my clients, they're on a budget, or they this or they that. I get it. I've heard it all. I've had that conversation in my own mind over and over and over again. And I have taken myself to task and gone through hundreds of hours of business coaching myself and spent tens of thousands of dollars on that training. I'm not going to lie. And what I found is that it really is just as important of a skill to get our mind straight around making money, especially in this industry. It's just as important to get our mind straight around that as it is in any industry. And the reason I say it's special to our industry is because our industry is largely built from generous, open-hearted, over-giving, service, caring people. And that's beautiful. And the flip side of that, when it becomes imbalanced, is that we can overgive and forget our value and our worth in the process, which actually devalues what we're giving. So then we end up giving more. So it becomes this cyclical, never raising the ceiling on what we've been making this whole time. So once I learned that for myself, I thought, oh my goodness, it was simpler than I thought and not as easy as I'd hoped. Okay, so I bring that professional development, that money mindset training that I took myself through, and I bring it into my year-long program, and we weave it into the program because it's not an instant, like you're not going to get it in a weekend, right? That said, I still want to give you something to take away from in this time together that we have today. And I want to give you the bigger picture that it is just as important to build that for yourself as it is all the skill that you bring to the table in your manual or movement practice. So there's a couple things that we go over that I know are biggies, especially for colleagues in this industry. And the first is what I talk about called money type. And there's 4 main money types. You heard me talk last week about 4 main communication styles. And so this running 4 seems to be interesting. So there's 4 main money types, and the money types are important to ID because they will literally dictate how and when you ask for money, if you even ask for it from your clients, I've actually heard from practitioners who say, my last client left and we were so into the dialogue and talking that they actually didn't pay, and I was too reluctant to ask them for their credit card. And the sweetness in that vulnerability is that I've actually been there. I've been there early on when I had such an amazing, warm, open-hearted connection with a client that they left and didn't leave a check. And I kind of froze. Like I didn't know what to say. And what happens is that the client, when they realize it, because they also had a warm and loving, open connection, they feel like a heel when they haven't paid for that amazing experience with you. So we actually do a disservice when we're too afraid to ask for payment. And that is very very deliberately drawn from one particular money type. It's really important to know what money type that is for you, so you know what you're doing and catch yourself on it. What we do with the money types is we identify which type we have, and then we come up with balancing actions to balance it out so that we're the healthiest version of that money type. There's another money type that gets really nervous around spending money. And so those practitioners would be very reluctant to pay for continuing education, right? Those are the ones who get all the free CEs. No offense if you're here, that's totally cool, although I'm not offering CEs to you today. But if you're this person, that, like, you'll skim the internet and spend hours looking for free CEs instead of just paying a few $100s for a really good one that will actually up-level your skill. And what that means then is that if your money type is the type that fails to invest in yourself, you will have a difficult time generating clients who invest in you, right? Like, it's as within, so without. So knowing the money type is really important, because I've heard practitioners say, I give and give and give, and I know I'm really skilled. And every time I talk to a new client, they kind of balk at my prices. Like, they don't even want to pay. And it makes me really angry, and they get kind of agitated about it. But the truth is that we bring that to the table, right? So if we're bringing that we don't want to invest in us to the table, we will have clients that don't invest in us, or don't want to, or they'll begrudgingly invest in us. And that makes for a very not fun work day, right? And that erodes our joy and our generosity, and it makes it just really, really difficult. Laura, you're resonating with this. Okay, awesome, good. Yeah, so we have 4 money types, and we go over them in great detail. And like I said, we bring balancing actions to all of them. It's no blame or shame. It's just like, recognize where you are with it, because we get to make a good living. We bring a lot to the table. Then the next thing that we go over is money story. So money story is different than money type. Money story is what we've been raised with and what we see in the world. So for example, a really common one, easy to pin the tail on the donkey on this one, is that, people who make a lot of money don't have any integrity, right? Like, we have negative associations to people who are very wealthy. If that's true, and of course we can find evidence in the world to prove anything we want. That's the whole point about science. You can skew even science to prove something if you want to skew the data in that direction. So whatever you're up to in your money story, you will find evidence to prove that. So let's say that that's your money story and you find evidence to prove it. Cool. That means that you're walking around with the story that making money, being affluent, is a bad thing. What do you think that's going to do to your revenue generating opportunity? It's going to squeeze it like a dry lemon. It's not going to allow you to have, a tree that bears fruit. So what we want to do is dive into, where did the story come from? What belief is it based on? Then rewrite the belief. Rewrite it, not to dismiss it and, like, all of a sudden now you're not allowed to believe that about wealthy people. You might have evidence that makes you swayed into that, lean into that direction. Cool. But that might be true for them and not you. And if it's not true for you, it shouldn't be eroding your wallet. And so that's the point. And so that's why we dig into money story. Where did it come from? Is it true for you? And if it isn't true for you, how can you balance it out and remedy the belief so that you can make a valuable living, bringing value to the table? And we all bring value to the table. I know that. I know you because I've interacted with you guys. So I know you're bringing value. You deserve to make a good living. And so sometimes we don't even know what's in the way of that, right? We think, oh, well, it's excuses. I can't charge that much, again, because of my clients, or I can't charge that much because other people in my area are only charging this month. They might have their own money story that's holding them back. They may have their own money type that prevents them from asking their client to pay at the end of the session. So don't base it on what your region is doing, based on what your common peers are doing. And that's why it's so beneficial in our mastery training program that we all train together, because then we can't talk ourselves out of it just being us. We actually are in community working that out together. It's so important to be in community of like minds. You know, there's a saying that says you are the equivalent of the median of the 5 people you hang around the most. It's true. And it doesn't have to be the people in your home. It can just be the people you spend the most time with. And one of those people could be you, by the way. So what are you telling yourself? And is that helpful? If it's not, then find a way to rewrite that dialogue. Okay. Another piece of generating value and making a good living is budgeting. So one of the things that you've probably experienced, as I have in our industry, is that when you're self-employed, there's no guaranteed every 2-week paycheck, right? So we get to generate some normalcy around that. Well, how do you do that with a fluctuating schedule? Exactly. So it's really important to look at not only industry trends, but more importantly, your trends, right? So seasonal trends, there's times of the year, I'm sure that you recognize that you don't make the same living. It's super important to get your handle on that, so that instead of panicking when you know that there's going to be a dip in your schedule, fill it with something that's value added, expect that it's coming, already have budgeted for it so that you can float during that period of time. And don't tell yourself stories that you're going to just generate money 365. It's not possible. It just doesn't, it's not possible. Even in a salaried guaranteed paycheck position, it wouldn't be possible. You have days off. So you want to make sure that you're budgeting realistically for how much you're generating, the days that you can generate, and most importantly, do something with the lulls so that your energy can stay at a high all the time. That fills your cup so that you can still give from a full cup. And it doesn't have to be a full cup because your client schedule is full, but it should be a full cup from something else, right? So I personally always budget for a 10-month year, meaning whatever I make the year before, I count that in 10 months and divide it by 12 for the following year, so that I can essentially take off a week for Christmas, or a week when my schedule dips, or a week when the area of the world that I live in, the winter, people can cancel all the time because of weather and things like that. So, and then they go on vacation, right? Even if you have a regular client, they are also going on vacation because they take time off from work. It's like a normal human thing to do that. So you want to make sure that you fluctuate, or that you balance for fluctuations is what I meant to say, because your clients aren't all going on vacation the same week. Like, you can't make that happen. So your income is going to fluctuate even if you have regular clients who come to you every week out of the year. They are going to take a few weeks off, and that is going to affect your revenue generating opportunities. So there's ways to fill in the gaps so that you're still filling yourself, so that when they come back, you're not panicked about the money. See, here's the thing, guys. When we're in scarcity or worry or panic about the money we're not making, our vibe is plummeting. When our vibe plummets, that can be smelled from across the room. So even if you bring the same skill set to the table with you week after week after week, your clients aren't feeling like you're bringing consistency week after week, because they can tell that something's off in your vibe, just like you can tell something's off in their vibe when they come in. So what we want to do is find a way to keep our cup full and keep our vibe high, because the higher the vibe, the higher the value. The higher the value, the higher the worth. The higher the worth, the higher the income. It's just the way it works out. And that doesn't mean that we're gouging people. It means we're generating that. It means we're generating that. Okay. And all of that also plays into the marketing and the messaging. You guys have heard me talk about messaging over and over again. I can't talk about it enough. When our vibe is high, we message a high vibe. When our vibe dips, we message desperation. I just came up with that. That's actually tweetable. I don't even tweet, but I would tweet that, right? What we don't want to do is message desperation, because again, it can be smelled from across the room. What we want to do is keep our vibe high, so that when we are maybe not seeing as many clients in a week, but we're generating marketing material, the words that we're writing are from a high vibe place. so that we then produce this high vibe newsletter, and then our clients come back and go, gosh, I missed you, and that newsletter was so awesome. Thank you for putting that content out, right? And if you're not putting content out, you're putting it somewhere. You're on social media. I know you are, because you're here with me. And you read my email. So I know that you're there some way, and your clients are looking for you in that way as well. And if you're not generating written material, that's okay. You're verbally messaging every time you speak to someone, whether it's an onboarding conversation when they call you on the phone for the first time, or it's something that you say to them at the end of their session that lets them know that there's more that you have to offer them. There's something in your message, whether it's verbal or written, that gets to be high vibe and high value. Because if you have any of that money type that you're afraid to ask for payment, you're definitely going to be afraid to ask for them to reschedule. And if you have a money story that says people who make a lot of money are actually gouging other people and unfair, you're going to have a hard time asking them to come back for another session, even when you know that there's more for them that their body needs that you have to offer. So what ends up happening is you're not generous by doing that. You're stingy by holding back. Now, isn't that an interesting flip? Right? It's rare that we think about us being kind and not asking too much as being stingy, but it absolutely is the energy of being stingy. It's not generous when we hold back from other people what they don't know exists that we know we have for them. And the way we get in our way with that is our money type and our money story. And it plays right into our messaging. So whatever you're putting out there in the world, verbal or written, it has an effect based on our money story and our money type. Okay. And then the last thing that we cover is values. So sometimes it's hard to remember what our values are because we're running and chasing. We're running and chasing the next client. We're running and chasing the next opportunity. And we're reinventing the wheel over and over again. And so the other thing that we talk about that I think is really important is the values. If you haven't yet considered what your values are, if you think that you know what they are, I really recommend going through an exercise of your own. If you're not in my mastery program, put yourself through that exercise. And the reason I say that is because it's easy to think that we do know our values, but when we put it pen to paper, this magical thing happens. When we see our values written down on paper, they become undeniable. It's like the best form of memory to have something in writing. I say it all the time. So when we have our values written down and we see what they are, then we get to ask ourselves, am I living them? Am I living them? If my value is family time and freedom, but I'm taking every client that calls at the last minute, every evening and every weekend, even when I promised myself or my family that I would spend time with them on the weekend, but I quote, need the money, so I'm going to take the client, we're not actually living our values. And I've heard it all, guys. I've had practitioners say, well, yeah, but you just said I get to make a living, but now you're telling me not to take the client. No, I didn't say don't take the client. What I said is take the client in your values. So if your value is to have evenings and weekends free, what I'm suggesting is that you create messaging that enrolls that client into another time that isn't weekends and evenings. And if you're not clear yet on what the messaging would be, we've talked about that a minute ago, it's largely developed from your money type and your money story, right? What we say is what we believe. What's in there. So as you can see, I believe that this is a very big and really important conversation to have as practitioners. I'm giving you, sort of the highlights at this place because you get to have this information. You get to have a really good living. You get to know that you're bringing value without feeling like you have to gouge someone to get your salary. That's not how it works. That's not how it works. It's totally value for value. So I want you to have the information, but most importantly, I want you to have a really thriving business because again, the more you're thriving, the more your cup is full, the more generosity you can have and give really good work to people who deserve it, right? There's a lot of people out there who need us right now. So I hope that this serves you. I did mention that these are aspects of the professional development portion of the Mastery Program. I would love for you to join me in the Mastery Program. We have a once a year annual enrollment. We're open enrollment as we speak. If that doesn't work for you and you're like, it's not the right time, or I don't really know enough about it, that's okay. Or if you already have your own method and you're not up to learning a new method, I get that too. I have a smaller package of just professional development where I do one-on-one coaching. I have very few spots available for that, but I have done that on occasion, and it's been helpful. It's been really supportive to walk some practitioners just through this professional development piece. I'm happy to do that too, but it needs to be a good fit. So please consider the professional mastery program because it's awesome and amazeballs, and I want you in it if you're vibing there. And if you're not sure if that's what you want or one-on-one coaching on just the money portion, then grab a link to my calendar and join me. Let's just have a discovery call and let's see what would be the right fit for you. I'm not interested in strong arming anyone into something that doesn't work for them. I'm very interested in discovering for you what does work for you and getting you there. If that's with me, awesome. If that's somewhere else, also awesome. You get to go where you're going to thrive is the point. Because if you're thriving, you're doing good work. And it's my mission to make sure that we live in a world that's pain-free. And I can't do it all on my own. I literally depend on all of you to do the good work that you do in the world. So we get to give you a platform where you're feeling really fed and nourished. And if we can do that for you, you will be full and you will serve from a full cup. So please jump on a call with me. I'll leave the link below this video, my calendar link, and just connect with me and let's just see where it fits for you. All right, I also want to just mention that I have a graduating class. Yay, my mastery program group 22 is graduating the end of March. And at the very last quarter of their year-long track, all of our practitioners put declarations together. So they're declaring what they're going to create for themselves professionally by the end of the program, which is literally in line with everything we just talked about, right? So we weave in this professional development and this money piece from the very beginning of the program, and we let it steep for 9 months. And then we make a declaration after we've learned what we've learned about what's been in our way and where we get to go with it. And we make these declarations. And then the last quarter of the professional development, or not the professional development program, excuse me, the mastery program, the last quarter of that program, which is a year-long track, they're creating this declaration. So it's super exciting to see what they create at graduation. So join me in celebrating them because they are hot on the trail of their own success as we speak. So I'm super excited about that. They will be mostly, I think most of them actually will be joining us for the retreat in 2 weeks, which I also hope that you will be joining us for that retreat in 2 weeks. Okay, so I talked myself into cotton tongue. So I've talked plenty now, hoping that that served you, hoping that there's value here for you. I'm hoping it generated questions, actually. I'm hoping it generated more questions and answers, because if it did, that means that you're turned on now to this discussion, and that matters because we get to explore that for you. You get to have a thriving business, a thriving, successful, happy client business. And with that, I'm going to turn the table over to you. I'm here to answer all questions that you have. It doesn't have to be on what I spoke about today, although I'm happy to answer more questions about that. But I'm literally here to answer any questions that you have. So how can I serve you? Please feel free to come off camera and come off mute and ask me your questions. If that's not something that your tech allows for you to do today, you're free to add your question in the chat. I will answer questions in the chat, although I love to hot seats, then we can have a person-to-person, volleyed back and forth type of conversation. So how can I serve you? What questions are on your mind today? Anybody? If there are no questions, I'm happy to let you go early. I'm also very happy to be with you for the rest of our time together today. I'm going to give it just one more minute and see if there are any hands that come up. Any questions? Anybody off mute? Anybody? Laura, hello. Hi.
Hey, I didn't really have a question. I just kind of wanted to add to what you were talking about, if that's kind of okay with you.
Oh, it's totally okay with me. I love this conversation. Please fill in.
Similar, I have gone through quite a few business coaches. Some were great and some were not so great.
Right.
And I do a lot of this, if people do come to their business or what have you, and there are money issues, I think a lot of that stems from lived experience and people's own relationship with money. So sometimes it's something that they have to dig deeper on, I found, and kind of explore, like, where did this come from? Like, how was I brought up? And like all these other facets and nuance that can happen with that. For me, what I've had to do is, it's kind of like that fine line of giving people options in terms of like how they want to communicate, but then also keeping a boundary in terms of what's in my capacity and how can I best be a coach. So like for me, this past year, I've actually I'm transitioning most of my business to online, and I'm doing it as a monthly coaching thing. So it's not a constant dollars for hours, because it does get like really, you burn out really easily, I feel like, in a lot of these industries. And there's a lot of, it's meant, like it's the intent is very well meaning, but it can just be like one of those things, like you said, like a massage therapist is like 4 to 6 years, like that's nothing, right? Mm-hmm. So for me, I've been transitioning more to an online model whereby it's just like a coaching package. And then that's got a lot of fluidity in it too. Like if somebody wants me to create a program that is 2 times a week for an hour, great. If it's like a mom and she's got kids and all she can do is 30 minutes a day, 2 times a week or 3 times a week, then we do that. You know what I mean? So it's also like keeping it open and fluid for the client, but then also making sure that it works for me as well as the business owner. So I just wanted to add that, because I think that it's important to kind of find the business model that works for you. And I'll still see some people in person for like assessments and things like that if they're local, kind of like you do. But yeah, I just think it's really important to kind of figure out a way to manage your business so it doesn't manage you. It's been a 5-year process, so I understand.
Yes. Yeah. And that's super important. I mean, so many points that you brought up, Laura, are so important. You always add such value here. So thank you for adding that. And you're right. Like, right. We want to manage it so it doesn't manage us. And in order to be the manager, you've got to be the authority. So if you're not an authority on your own money stuff, you can't manage that part of you. And to your point, it was a 5-year track for you. It was probably that long for me too. It's not going to happen in a 30-minute live on YouTube, right? Like you get to be invested in how do you create a viable business, which is separate and secondary from your skill set, right? You've got to have good skill in order to have a viable business. And then the viable business is not automatic because of the skill. So we both said the same thing there. Awesome. And you're right. It does need to be a business model that works for you. And I feel like when there's money type and money story in the way, practitioners will literally reinvent themselves and turn themselves inside out to do whatever it takes to make the money. And that's still giving from a scarcity model. It's not giving from a generous model. And I've heard folks say, well, everybody went to online, so I need to go online, but I don't like being in front of a camera. Then why are you doing it? Right. Because the truth is that not all clients like to be online either. Some of them love it. They're like, holy God, that's amazing. My kids are in the other room eating dinner, doing their homework, and I'm getting my personal care in. And other people are like, no, if you're not going to be in the same room with me and share oxygen, I don't feel like I really was served. Cool. Because you know what? We can't all see everybody. Right. So do exactly what you do really well. And the people who really want that really will come, and they will find tremendous value in it. And that's part of like following the value system. What's your value in the way you work, right? All of that pieces together. It's so important. It is such a bigger topic than what we could even cover in 20 minutes. And you brought up so many good points that just land what I said. So thank you for that. And I could go on and on about it.
I know people that are kind of hybrid, like they do some online stuff and some in-person stuff. Like I know somebody, I was listening to a podcast and she's a physical therapist, but then she also does online training. Like she does her own clients that are online. So it's like, you can always, people kind of can find what works for them. And, she didn't want to completely leave the physical therapy industry, although she saw like there were some problematic areas and things like that. Like some of the things we've talked about, like microscopic and not thinking, but because of her personal training and her anatomy, she's better about looking at the whole thing versus just the one little region of where the issue may be.
Oh, I love her already. I want to meet her.
Idaho. But I thought that was really cool. And then somebody else I follow, she's a dance teacher, but then she also does online training, and she has clients that they do their own thing and then they do check-ins and things like that. So I think there's definitely fluidity too, and like how you can do some in person if you still need that connection, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Otherwise.
Yeah. And I think there's a third version too, which you might have been saying, I'm not sure, but doing work one-on-one in person is almost exchange for doing work one-on-one online. It's still hours for dollars. So the group training, the group practitioner work, mostly yoga teachers are the ones that are most familiar with that, or any type of exercise, group training classes. So not everyone is poised to do group work, and not all clients want that either, but some do.
Yeah.
And so it's a totally different model in service when you're doing something that you're used to doing one-on-one and then turning it into group training. A lot of practitioners have a little bit of a hurdle there when they're like, well, how do I do this for everybody when I'm used to just serving one client at a time and giving them what they need? That's a different, it's a different treatment plan, for lack of a better phrase. And we go over that too in my mastery program, because there's a huge ask for it, especially in the last 2 years, and it's a different skill set. So you've got to be able to transition from one-on-one work to group work, if that's what you want to do, or at least know how to do it, to know that you don't want to do it, right?
Yeah.
Or like to know what you don't want. But yeah, we go over that as well, because it's hours for dollars is still hours for dollars, even if you're working online. You're just not driving to go get the hour done.
So my online is not set up that way. My online is set up so that it's more like it's a coaching program. So they're getting, like, I do the assessment and everything, and then they're getting like a month or 6 weeks or however it's working out. And then the accountability and everything is built into that. So I'm not physically sitting there every time they're working out. It's different.
Okay. How are they getting their workout? It's like pre-recorded work from you?
Yeah, it's in an app actually.
Oh, beautiful.
Yep.
Beautiful. I love it.
I did
I
a
love
whole
it.
online training course back in 19, I think. There's an online training course out there for personal trainers, and I went through that whole rigmarole. It was really good though. I mean, it totally told you how to set it up, how to run it, how to do other things, and then pick and choose what works for you, what doesn't, blah blah blah.
Yeah.
But that's how I do it. I don't sit there and like watch them work out, but I think it's important to have options of like, let's do a video check-in. Let's, I think assessing is really important and things like that. So we are progressing correctly, and we know that things are looking the way they should.
Yeah.
So
yeah. Beautiful.
Yeah.
And so Laura, do you navigate pain and injuries in the work that you do? It sounds like you do from the conversations we've had before.
Yeah.
So how can you do that if you're not present with them? Fill us in.
So a lot of times what I'm doing is I'm working with people who are coming back from injury. So they've already like gone through like PT and things like that. So usually, like I said, I'll see them for an assessment, and I'll go through like movement patterns and things like that and go, okay, I see where like things need improvement. I see where things are pretty good. And then I write them a program according to that. And then what I like to do in theory, which again, this wasn't happening so much last year, is that for them to send me a video or whatever of them doing like the move that is a challenge for them. Let's say it's like a lunge, for example, that seems to be challenging for a lot of people. So that I can go ahead and say like, okay, like we went over this either in person or we did it on Zoom, and we talked about, what was appropriate for you. Like, let me see if this is getting better. Because I think it's really important to have those check-ins and those like, hey, is this getting better? Are we getting somewhere? Or do we need to like re-navigate this whole thing and figure out if there's other exercises that need to come into play to make this work? You know what I mean?
Yeah, I do. My mind is spinning. Like, I'm like, how would I make that happen? Because my experience with pain and injury is it's very individual. We've talked about that. It's very individual. And so if I can't get my eyes on them, I don't know what individually they need. So that would definitely require, like you said, at least a portion of one-on-one, so that you're visually assessing and walking them through it. I find that just telling clients what to do doesn't necessarily mean it happens, because they're not aware of what their patterns are. So they don't see that their right leg and their left leg aren't doing the same thing. It feels like it is to them. So they don't even realize that they're generating compensatory patterns until they're spotted and recorrected, corrective exercise, if you will. Yeah. So see, like you said, our work is endless. We have a lot of work to do with a lot of people who really need us. And so it matters that we feel full, like we're making enough money to be able to continue to serve them, especially when they're navigating pain and injury, because they're afraid. They're afraid and their quality of life is in the pits. And so they deserve to have our service. Laura, that's awesome. I'm so excited for you. And I'm really happy that you shared with us. Thank you for giving us more to think about.
Yeah. I was just saying, like, I didn't have like all the assessment stuff built in, and I just built that in for this year because I'm like, it's super important to me to, again, check in and see, like, is this getting better? Because like if we're just assuming, then we're not really helping. But if we can see it a month or so later and be like, okay, it is, or okay, we're still doing, like, then we got to kind of recalibrate and figure it out. So
yeah, my suggestion is that I don't know what the frequency is in that month's period of time, but if you're assessing only once a month, that's a lot of hours to repeat a pattern. I would shorten that. If your focus is to get them out of functional discrepancies and to eliminate or avoid pain or heal from injury or pain, a month is a long time to repeat a pattern.
gotcha. Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah, especially if it's your work that they're repeating, because then it's kind of on your clock that they did it with your work. They're
Yeah.
doing it in other ways too. It's the way they're walking is the way they're walking. But if your focus is to correct function, that's I recommend a shorter window.
Okay, cool. That's good to know.
Unsolicited.
Yeah, I have to do like 20-minute or 30-minute check-ins in between that as well, but that's something I got to get like more on top of and stuff like that. So
Yeah. Awesome. Thanks for doing good work out there. Thanks for being here as always. I love seeing your smiling face. Okay, we have a couple minutes left. Are there any other questions? Anybody else have something to add to the conversation? I know a couple new people popped in. Haywood, nice to see you always. I'm glad you made it. I know it's tough for you. I'm glad you're here. Jenny, hi. Mylin, I love that you're here. And Lucia, did I say your name correctly? I hope I did. My apologies if I didn't, but I'm so glad that you're all here. This has been a super fruitful conversation. I could go on. I say that every week, but it's true. I need more time with you, which is why we're doing a 3-hour retreat in 2 weeks. I hope you'll all come. Laura, did you sign up already for the retreat? You'll be there? Excellent. I can't wait to see you there. Great. If you haven't grabbed your seat yet, please do. I will leave another link in the bottom of this email, or bottom of this video, and you should have already received an email invitation. We'll send you another one to make sure. Please feel free to invite your peers, right? It's complimentary. It's like an extended version of what we do here, but I'm going to dive into functional anatomy and spend 3 solid hours on it. Tons of time for Q&A, so that we'll have more than just a nugget. And again, we will not be here live together next week. We will be back in 2 weeks for our 3-hour retreat. Again, if you can't make it for the whole 3 hours, that's okay. You can come in and get what you can and leave when you need to, especially if you're serving clients. I totally get that. But hopefully we've given you enough notice to mark at least a generous portion of that time on your calendar. And like I said, everyone's welcome. It's my treat. Please bring your colleagues, bring your peers, bring anybody who's interested in doing good work, because the world needs us. The world needs us to do good work. All right, my loves, if there are no other questions, I will let you go for now, and I'm looking forward to seeing you all in 2 weeks. Okay, and until then, continue to do really good work in the world. Bye for now.